Have some breaking election news for you now out of Wyoming with the Democratic caucus there. I want to take you right to Cheyenne with NBC's Kristen Dahlgren with those results. Kristen.
Yeah, hey there, Francis. And state officials here have just declared Bernie Sanders the winner of the Wyoming caucus. I'm joined by Amy Van Cleve to give us the official results. What can you tell us?
So we're only at about 76% reporting, but right now Senator Sanders leads in terms of state delegates, 121 to 94.
How does that translate into national delegates then?
So in terms of national delegates, it'll go proportionally. So Senator Sanders will get more national delegates than Secretary Clinton will.
How close is this? Is it as close as you expected, or where does it stand?
This is actually a lot closer than we thought. So really it's going to come down to every last county getting their numbers in.
And when do you expect that? All those results in tonight?
We're hoping to get all results in within the next hour or so.
Okay.
Yep.
It was a surprise to a lot of people that Secretary Clinton won Laramie County here, given what we saw in the caucus room.
Sure.
What can you tell me about the caucuses around the rest of the state? Did surrogate ballots make a difference there as well?
So in a lot of counties, surrogate ballots did make a difference, but Albany County, for instance, it really just came down to turnout, and so they delivered on that by quite a bit.
And Albany County, tell me a little bit more about that, because that was expected.
Yeah, so Albany County is where our university is, for those of you who don't know, and what really it came down to was we had about 930 Sanders supporters out and only about 320 Clinton supporters, so big blowout there.
We talked about overall the statewide delegate vote. Can you give me numbers at all on how close the vote was as far as popular vote?
Yeah, in terms of popular vote, it's still also pretty close. Not as close as the delegate number, so it does come down to a little bit of delegate math.
Okay, anything else that you can tell us about?
We're really excited to have just over 8,500 voters out statewide today, which is really exciting for Wyoming.
And going into the national convention, do you expect them to have very close numbers of delegates? There are 14 still up for grabs. What do you project the shakeout there to be?
I think it'll come in pretty close, but it's still a little early to say firm national delegate numbers.
Okay, great. Amy Van Cleve, thank you so much. So, yeah, Francis, there you have it. Bernie Sanders winning the Wyoming caucus, making this his 7th state victory in a row. There's been a lot of talk about how he needed this for the momentum. This is the last state voting before they go to that big New York primary. Bernie Sanders keeps bringing it up on the trail, the momentum, having the momentum going into New York. So that's definitely something to watch as we move forward now.
Yeah, so small as far as delegate count there, but certainly that psychological win coming before New York. Crucial as well. Kristen Dahlgren, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I want to bring back in political reporter Gabe DiBenedetti. And when you hear this news that's coming in that Bernie Sanders has won the Wyoming caucus, and interesting to hear initially, or he was favored, no real surprises there. But what's your take on it, knowing from what we just heard in that report that this was a little bit closer than expected?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to see that Secretary Clinton overperformed in Wyoming. This is a state that was really always probably going to go to Senator Sanders. He does especially well in these caucus states and these western ones. You look at Idaho and you look at Utah, which are right near Wyoming, of course, and he really beat her by large margins there. None of these states have huge amounts of delegates when it comes to the national convention. So it's not about the his final ability to cut into her delegate lead, but it's really about his momentum play. So he's still going to be able to say, I've won 8 of the last 9 contests or 9 of the last 10, however he wants to count it, heading into New York. But in terms of actually cutting into her lead of roughly a bit over 200 pledged delegates, this is not going to get him very far. And if it was ever going to get him anywhere, the fact that it's closer than he expected, it's a bit of a disappointment for him.
All right, pausing now because we know that Senator is at an event in Long Island City, New York, has not been aware that he has won Wyoming, although making reference to it. But I'm chatting with you and leading up to this and knowing that we've seen more of those attacks. Actually, you know what? Let's actually go to that event with Bernie Sanders in Long Island City, and let's take a quick listen.
So what are some of the issues that are out there that we have got to deal with? Well, very fundamentally, we have got to address the massive attacks against democracy that we have seen in recent years. 6 years ago, the United States Supreme Court made one of the worst decisions in the history of this country in Citizens United. And what they said is that, okay, billionaires, you already own much of the nation. Now we're going to give you the opportunity to buy the United States government. And that is what they are trying to do as we speak. You got families, billionaire families like the Koch brothers, the second wealthiest family in America, and you got other billionaires prepared to spend $900 million in this campaign cycle to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. $900 million. When you have a handful of families spending more money than either the Democratic or Republican parties, that is not democracy. That is oligarchy. We will not allow that to take place. And then, in addition to that, in addition to the ability of the 1% to try to buy elections and undermine democracy, you got another reality going on. And that is you have cowardly Republican governors all over this country who are trying to suppress the vote. Now just think about it. Think about the torturous path that this nation has gone through in terms of democracy. Women couldn't vote. African Americans couldn't vote. Poor whites couldn't vote. And we struggled over our history. Good people stood up and fought back to expand democracy. And now, as a result of another disastrous Supreme Court decision undermining the Voting Rights Act of 1965, you got Republican governors figuring out ways that they can make it harder for poor people, people of color, young people, old people to participate in the political process. What an outrage. And what I say to those Republican governors, if they don't have the guts to participate in free, fair, and open elections, they should get out of politics, get another job.
Just a little snippet there of this live event where Bernie Sanders is speaking right now. This, as just a few moments ago, we understand we're reporting that Bernie Sanders has won the Democratic caucus in Wyoming, has not made reference to it from what we understand. He has not been made aware that he has won that, although he did reference it earlier. I want to bring back in Gabe DiBenedetti talking about this and looking ahead, as we've heard, and considering this one, even though we were just talking about the momentum that this win may help him with, even though it's not delegate rich, but how that may help. We're talking also on the other side, Gabe, about Hillary Clinton, and this will be now her 7th consecutive loss when it comes to the nominating contest. What will we expect to see from Bernie Sanders leading into New York? We've heard of him and his attack saying, you know what, Hillary Clinton is claiming New York as her home, but she was born in Illinois, and knowing the back and forth that we've seen with the unqualified terminology in there, what can we see as far as Bernie Sanders after this Wyoming win leading up to New York?
Well, right. This basically just underscores how important New York really is for both of them. New York is the second most delegate-rich state of all of them in the Democratic primary process. And as you said, they both have very close ties to the state. I think what you're going to see is both of them continuing to sharpen their knives. There's no question that the Clinton campaign is eager to finish the primary and move on to the general election, though they're still working on the primary. And there's also no question that Sanders is trying to make the case that this thing is not over. He is very clear that he's trying to play in this tabloid environment in New York politics. He's going to continue to go after her in any way he can. He's been sharpening his contrasts, really leaning hard on the part of his speech where he says, I want to tell you about the differences that I have with Secretary Clinton. I don't think you're going to continue to see them having the conversation over who is qualified, because I think that didn't end up working out the way that either of them hoped. But I think what you're going to continue to see is rising tensions in some way or another, because they both think that they have a pretty legitimate claim to being the proper son or daughter of New York.
Well, especially when it comes to where they're targeting Hillary Clinton, you know, upstate, getting that working class vote, and also the all-important, very, very crucial minority vote in New York, and see how both of them will go about in getting that.
That's absolutely right. And, you know, one thing that the Clinton campaign has often pointed out is that Sanders tends to do very well in states that are overwhelmingly white. And Wyoming, obviously, is no exception to that rule. New York is an extremely diverse state. And that's something that, they have been focusing on when making the case that this is not a state that works particularly well for him. It's also going to have a closed primary, which means that if you're not registered as a Democrat, you can't vote in the Democratic primary. Sanders has not won a ton, or actually any, closed primaries so far. All of his primary wins, as opposed to caucus wins, have come in open or semi-open states where you can vote as a Democrat or as an independent. So they'll be leaning very hard on, focusing on minority outreach, but also focusing on trying to make sure people know if you're a true Democrat, they say you should vote for Secretary Clinton, not for Senator Sanders, who, of course, has been an independent for so many years.
Right, as he is there at that live event, taking a nice sip of water as we're coming out of this win in Wyoming in the Democratic caucus with Bernie Sanders claiming victory there. Gabe Benedetti, thank you very much for your time. We'll check back in with you as we continue on with this. Also want to take you now live to New Rochelle, upstate New York, where Ohio Governor John Kasich has just taken the stage for a town hall. Let's take a quick listen and then come back and see you after the break.